Let me welcome to the show. He is a professor at Harvard University teaching the Geechee Gullah language. He's also the slayer of trolls on the TikToks and the internets and social media of things. Don't come for him if he didn't call for you. Let me welcome the one and only Sunn Michaud. Hello.
Peace, peace, peace. I'm happy to be here. Very,
Good.
very
That's
happy.
happy to see you. So I'm watching Outer Banks. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you're familiar with this on Netflix.
Uh-huh.
So I'm into season 3 now, and I can't stand John B's father. I'm hoping that I learn some more. Anyway, I'm like, why did he have to? Anyway, so, but it is a story that I didn't know that I wanted to watch that centers around a formerly enslaved man that is that survives a shipwreck. So there's
Right,
a ship thing. Everybody dies but him, and there's gold and treasures. And maybe the Shroud of Turin is inside a cross that's on it. It's all of this. And these kids find it. These
right,
kids these kids they call pogues, poor, I guess they're poor young urchins who find it, but the rich, wealthy people keep Lucying them, pulling the
right,
football every time.
right,
And then you find out that one of the black children is related to the formerly enslaved man who became
right,
so rich that he would buy the freedom with the gold and started a
right.
church. And this man's name was Denmark Tanny. And I wondered if he was loosely based on Denmark Vesey.
I wouldn't, that wouldn't be completely out of question. I'm sure they drew loosely from different characters. Well, I wouldn't say characters, but different historical figures in order to come the storyline, even if there's some fantasy involved. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some influence there from Denmark Vesey, Denmark Tanny, Denmark Vesey. What are the chances?
Right. I was like, interesting.
Hmm.
I like art giving us breadcrumbs because it's still art. It's fiction. It's fantasy. It's all of that. But if it allows for people to explore things, so they're putting this in the rich versus the poor, you're getting to see it's more
Right.
class than it is race. You're getting to see, all of that. And I think that's good, especially for young people. And I think this show is geared towards teens. Have
Right.
you watched it? You're familiar
Yes,
with it.
actually,
Okay.
yes, I have. There's an element. Well, there are a couple things about it that I find fascinating, which is that real people in the real world, as far as the OBX is concerned, people who are from the region, whenever you're from a place that doesn't get a lot of attention, you want it to be represented well, and you take pride in it. So the show itself wasn't all shot where it's located in the storyline. A lot of it was also shot in the Low Country. Not sure how much of it was shot in North Carolina. And they have this is the first time that they've included historical or cultural elements in the show to kind of give it some roots, some foundation. They included Gullah Geechee culture in it as well in first season. They included references rather to things that were both historical and again fantasy, but historically inspired. So that's if it's not a historical show, then that's a lot. That's not really. That's kind of all you can really ask for. I mean, there are times when I've seen some shows that were supposed to be historically inspired. It was just so it's like like Harriet Tubman Vampire Slayer, something something really wild or whatever. But when they're able to present the story in a way that is historically influenced and also gives you some room to imagine, storylines like these. And I want to say that this isn't too far from reality. There actually were people who you'll hear a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, there were black, slave owners too," and that without context. Speaking of African Americans, without context, you would just say, "Okay, well, this is either a false equivalence or some, atom bomb of a truth bomb that was just set off." But in reality, although there were some, because there will always be some of us who just ain't down with the program. We're
There's
just
always a Tim Scott and a Candace Owens. There's
yeah.
always
There's always
going to be.
right. There's gonna be those, but it wasn't uncommon for people who did come into money, who did come into some degree of wealth or affluence, to then use that to purchase the freedom of friends and loved ones and other people. Because at the end of the day, slavery, racism itself, it is really capitalism. It's color coded capitalism. At the end of the day, and color is used like a denomination of money. Essentially, that's the way that
Wow.
the system was built. And even just because whiteness may be the color, the so-called color of whiteness may be, say, the largest bill in that denomination. Don't get it twisted and believe that you're not still in the fold with everyone else. The system was created in order to exploit and take advantage of bamboozled white people just as well. So
Amen.
you'll
Amen.
see that in the history. So, but I digress. Yeah, there historically, many of us would use our affluence and use whatever gains we had for liberation of the people who were left behind. I'd like to see much more of that in modern times. I'd like to see much more of that in today's climate of Black affluence being something that ends up being an upliftment of us as a
Hmm.
collective, as opposed to feeding into the class warfare. We got a lot of progress to go in that direction, but it's good to see it depicted, even if in a fictional context. It's good to see that idea promoted.
Yeah, there was a professor, and this is why I thought of you. The kids found a diary. They found a letter from this Denmark Tanny person written in Geechee Gullah. And
Hmm.
I was like, I wonder if Son Michaud knows how to translate. And he translated it. I was like, this. So was it real Geechee Gullah? Did he translate it well? Did you get to see this?
Well, I know that he translated it well because I translated it.
Come on through. See, I didn't
Yeah,
know this, y'all. I didn't know
right,
this. I just finished.
right.
I'm at episode 4 or 5 of season 3, and I knew Son was gonna be here, so I said, I'm gonna ask him about this when he comes, because this was
Right.
fascinating that you translated that letter.
Well,
Come on through.
if you ask yourself, if you've seen the show, what is the teacher's name?
Yes, it's Michelle. It's
It's
Son.
Mr.
No,
Yeah,
it's
it's
Son.
Mr. Yeah,
Sunn. That is his
yeah.
name. I thought about that too. Oh my goodness. So
And what
why didn't
does
they
the
just let
teacher?
you do it? Because I feel like you could have acted that role.
Well, I could have. The thing about that was at a time when it was presented to me. I got the correspondence late in the game, and so by way of email, and we finally were able to connect with one another. And when I finally got the connection at the time, and it was a translation job to get the translation for the script. They wanted to make sure that it was authentic, and they were getting
Wow.
so they sent it to me, and I said, okay, cool, I can go ahead and do that. Um, but what I didn't see was the email before then, the message before then, that I got through a different message that was actually asking what I consider doing the role, like what I consider being the person who actually acted it out. But I completely missed that correspondence, so
Man,
wasn't
you would
able to
have.
say yay or nay.
The professor, he ended up tied up in a Brooklyn basement, but I could see you do. I was like, you have so much more personality, because you got a lot going on, son.
Well,
That would have been dope.
I've had people ask me, they're like, listen, maybe it's some kind of coincidence, but there's a brown skinned dude with a beard and long locks on OBX. His name is Mr. Sunn, and he's the Gullah teacher on that show. Coincidence?
Wow.
No,
Wow.
no, it's not a coincidence. But shout out to them for doing that, though, because I mean, it's one of the people like, oh, weren't you worried about them using your image? Like, no, actually, I'm not. They didn't know that I wasn't disinterested. They didn't know that it's something that I would have loved to have done. And just as an ode or a head nod, I suppose, to the real me, they cast accordingly. So I don't know which one is cooler, to like be cast in the part, which would be cool, but or to have someone cast as you in the part. And either way, it was an honor. I appreciate
Listen, I read a lot and watch a lot of television because it sparks my imagination. It helps me think about things differently. It stretches me. Sometimes it pisses me off
it.
because
Right,
stuff is just so bad and have little imagination. But I always, in my mind, I'm like, how could this be better? Oh, if they
right,
just did this, as I craft the next thing, because there's nothing new under the sun. I'm working on a project right now. I just downloaded a book that I need to help me inspire because I was struggling through it. And boom, it clicked. I read this opening, the prologue, and I was like, I got it.
right.
Like I was talking to some young people today, and I'm like, they were like, what's your legacy? And I'm like, my legacy is going to be community, because none of us do this by ourselves. Somebody came before, I feel like we pedestalize folk as opposed to understanding that the role is to hand the baton off and you run your leg. Right. And so to me, everybody that has done something can be an inspiration for you to do something as well. So that there's that.
Well, that is what I think that's a part of it. I mean, even when I was talking recently, even about land ownership, the fact that the property in my family has been handed down from generation to generation, and we were fortunate enough to have deeds, so like clear title. So it wasn't just heirs property that sometimes ends up in a logistical quagmire to hold on to. Yet, even though it's technically in your name and you are technically legally efficient, the owner, I think of it as stewardship more so than ownership. That it is your job to hold on to it, to maintain it, to preserve it, and make sure that it is in a whole, that it remains whole and in a state that it can be passed on to the next generation of family that comes after you, for them to do the same. And I don't want to be the one who's the weak link in the chain that fumbled the bag when it came to holding on to the familial legacy. But I think it's also our responsibility to add to it, not just pass it on, but also to add to it. And so that's what I've been trying to contribute to in a community wise, family wise, creating intellectual property, creating things that are on a community level that other people can take advantage of, also helping other people out, being able to help create not only wealth, but also networking so that we can help someone else. And so if that's a part of it, if when I'm gone, there's 2 or 3 people who can say, listen, when I needed XYZ, Sunn looked out, or because Sunn did ABC, I'm able to do XYZ. That to me is the real legacy.